Hey everyone, welcome to my sort of snippet video. There's going to be two different locations in this video. And right now we're looking at the Waverly Station Post Office. And this is Homewood and Fillmore Street in Baltimore. And these are the Montpelier apartments. But this is not what I'm want to show you. Is behind me is this wall. Now, I first noticed this wall back in the 90s. I used to go to the Waverly Station Post Office, and I always wondered what was behind it. And as I one day was up there with my video camera, I decided to take the short walk to the rear of the wall, and there was a gate, and the gate was open. So I went inside, and it was a cemetery. It's an old family cemetery. The people buried here were a very prominent Baltimore family, the Pattersons. And Robert Patterson was sort of the big guy in the family, and where the cemetery is used to be their country home. And if you actually stand in the rear of the cemetery outside the gate, if you look, you can see the inner harbor off in the distance, and that's where Robert Patterson, his ships that were coming in to port, he could see them from his property. The mysterious thing about this cemetery is that nobody knows who the caretaker is. You would think the city would be the caretakers, but they're not. So nobody knows who. I love that 1793 up there. I guess that's when the first family members were interred here, or when it was established. But anyway, you'll see in the vintage footage that I have that it does look like somebody goes in and whacks the grass down, and not, fully maintain it, but they keep it so it doesn't overgrow. Here's a peek in from the video I shot yesterday with my phone, but we're gonna go to that vintage footage right now. This is inside. I only have about a couple minutes of footage of this place. Robert Patterson's daughter, Betsy, her infant sisters are buried here. And I'm sorry, I'm looking up this information as we're reading right now. God, there's so much information on this place. Her brothers, basically the last family member was interred here in the 1920s. The land was offered to the city at the time, and the city refused the land. And so this cemetery sits behind this wall, sort of forgotten and I wouldn't say neglected, but you can see here it does look like somebody is coming in and doing just the bare minimum to keep it from completely overgrowing, because if you just left this, it would turn back into woods. There would just be trees growing everywhere. You can see here it's open. And there's that 1793 up there. So it's really fascinating. And I was so delighted to find this footage, finally. So let's move on to our next location, the Apollo Theater. Excited about this one. Here's the old Apollo Theater. Finally found a way in. It's been years and years. Let's have a peek inside. Careful.
Major flaw. Son of a bitch, there's no battery in this. Ew.
All right, here we are entering the old Apollo Theater, located on the 1500 block of Harford Road, opened in 1920 and showed the last movie in 1980. Then became a church, which is par for the course for a lot of the old theaters in Baltimore. This was the Baltimore Tabernacle of Prayer. Once they shut down, which we are not quite certain the date of when that particular church closed, the theater was left abandoned. Now, weird thing is, and you see this decay in here. This is years, probably a decade worth of decay. You can see the old, the drop ceilings, these little like white metal things are all skeleton of a drop ceiling that was put there probably by the church. So they probably didn't use the balcony or the second floor at all. They probably just utilized the first floor. You got Michael and Brian there from the Proper People, which they were kind of like the good luck charms on this trip. There's Jaden from Nation of Decay. A whole fucking army of twinks out with their dad, John Wayne Gacy. Isn't that fun? So I've always wanted to see this theater. You can see, looking at the seating, these are the old seats, probably from the 1920s. Well, the theater opened in 1920, so these seats go back even before that, but they're basically metal frame, wooden seats with a fold-out, the part where you sit down that folds in and out. Very uncomfortable. But back then, I mean, nobody knew any better. I mean, now you have theaters where you're basically sitting in a lazy boy chair watching, a movie. My first real interest in urban exploring was when I moved to Baltimore when I was 19. I mean, I moved downtown. I lived, in the suburbs. But I started noticing all these theaters, the Hippodrome, the Mayfair. What was that other theater that used to be there? It's gone now. I can't remember. But we used to go into these places. The Hippodrome, I went into the Hippodrome before it was completely redone. And it was basically just this dark, incredible... I mean, the most incredible thing you've ever seen is decaying, enormous theater. And when I say enormous, the Hippodrome is huge. But to see it now, when if we go see a show there, and it's completely restored, and it's just amazing to remember back when, I remember the marquee letters in the lobby were just stacked up, and there was mold, and we would find like old candy wrappers, and it was just insane. But yeah, I mean, that's really where it started. So the Apollo is one of the theaters I wanted to see for a long time. And finally got to see it. Wasn't the greatest. I mean, it wasn't like take my breath away kind of thing. It was so stressful walking. See, I was going to go to the lobby and go upstairs and see the projection room and everything. It was so stressful walking on these floors, and I wanted to go get my mask because there was so much mold. By the time I got outside, I'm like, I don't feel like going back in. So I just waited for the boys. But I'm pretty sure the Proper People will have a more comprehensive look at the upstairs of the theater. And even Jaden as well at Nation of Decay. So maybe you'll get to see something better. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. And make sure to join us on the podcast on Patreon. It's a great show. Thank you all. Goodbye.